Imagine living in an empire where currency ceases to represent wealth and instead symbolizes utter despair, where a simple purchase at the market might cost triple the price from the day before, not due to a scarcity of goods, but because the money itself has lost its intrinsic value. In the 3rd century, the Roman Empire, at the zenith of its territorial power, was grappling with an invisible yet devastating foe, the erosion of faith in the very worth of its own coinage. Would you accept a coin that looks like silver, but upon touch reveals its deception? That was what the Romans began to reject. The denarius, once a symbol of imperial stability, started being forged with ever-decreasing amounts of silver. For the government, it was a solution, saving precious metals to finance wars and pay salaries. But for the people, it was an affront and the harbinger of chaos. On one hand, merchants were inflating prices. On the other, soldiers demanded payment in genuine gold. The people? They struggled to survive amidst a broken system where bartering vanished and inflation seemed relentless. What initially appeared as a monetary adjustment morphed into a crisis of continental proportions. But what truly prompted Rome to erode trust in its own currency? Who were the parties responsible for this fateful decision? And how did this collapse reverberate through the economic, social, and political foundations of the ancient world's most formidable empire? In this video, we'll delve into the backrooms of a silent yet brutal crisis that shook the very foundations of Rome. And in the end, perhaps you'll realize that today's money carries lessons not so far removed from that era. The 3rd century AD was one of the most tumultuous periods in the history of the Roman Empire. The Pax Romana, that golden age of stability and expansion, had come to an end, giving way to an era of uncertainties, external threats, internal power struggles, and increasingly severe economic crises. Rome, though still imposing, was crumbling from within. As the empire expanded, so did the costs of maintaining it. Armies stationed along distant borders, gargantuan infrastructure, public works, and an ever-expanding bureaucracy. To finance all of this, the state resorted to a seemingly innocuous but perilous practice. It began to debase the silver content in its coins, particularly the denarius, the primary currency in circulation. The logic was simple, or so it appeared. With less silver, the government could produce more coins and thus have more money at its disposal. But what seemed like a financial solution morphed into an economic catastrophe. The population swiftly recognized the erosion of their currency's real value. Confidence, the very bedrock of any monetary system, began to falter. And when confidence wanes, money ceases to function as it should. The devaluation of Roman currency sparked runaway inflation, a scarcity of essential goods, market disarray, and even the collapse of commercial transactions. The economy began to sink into a mire from which it would never fully recover. In this video, we delve into the intricacies of this crisis, how political and economic decisions have eroded the monetary foundation of an entire empire. We will examine its impact on the daily lives of the people, the response of merchants, the rampant inflation, and, most importantly, how this unfolding drama mirrors a recurring pattern throughout history. Prepare yourself for a journey into the heart of Rome's economic decline, and to uncover the enduring lessons it holds for us. It all begins with a coin, the silver denarius. Created in the Roman Republic, it was a symbol of stability and trust. For centuries, the denarius maintained a high standard of purity, reflecting the empire's strength and supporting its vast commercial network. However, in the 3rd century, this symbol began to lose its luster, literally. Emperor Caracalla, in 215 AD, took the first step towards introducing the Antoninianus, a new coin with a silvery appearance but with a lower metallic content than the denarius. In practice, it was worth less than it promised. Seemingly, it was a clever maneuver. By reducing the silver content, the government could produce more coins and inject liquidity into the economy. However, the populace was not deceived for long. Official counterfeiting proliferated. Under subsequent emperors such as Maximian and Philip, the purity of coinage plummeted drastically. Within a few years, what had once been a solid silver coin degenerated into a copper disc with a mere superficial metallic plating. Inflation began to erode the currency's value, driving prices into a frenzy. The The reality for Roman citizens was harsh. The price of bread escalated weekly, salaries depreciated almost instantaneously, and change was non-existent as no one desired devalued coins. The soldiers, who upheld the empire with their arms, began demanding payment in gold or tangible goods, for they no longer trusted the government's own currency. Furthermore, interprovincial trade began to unravel. Regions that had previously engaged in free exchange now demanded payments in precious metals or even goods. The imperial monetary system, which had once linked Rome to Britannia, Egypt, and the Orient, started to crumble. The issue transcended mere finance. It became structural, threatening the very cohesion of the empire. What initially seemed to be a straightforward fiscal adjustment was rapidly transforming into the catalyst for a widespread crisis. However, the most severe consequences were yet to unfold. The collapse of the Roman currency was not merely an economic issue. It was a crisis of confidence that eroded the very foundations of the empire. Once the populace lost faith in the value of the currency, it ceased to circulate organically. Commerce ground to a halt. Wages no longer purchased essential goods. Driven to desperation by poverty, the people turned to barter, exchanging food for clothing, tools for services. The monetary economy regressed centuries. Rampant inflation fueled a vicious cycle. Prices soared uncontrollably, and the government responded by minting even more coins, each with diminishing value. By 268 AD, the Antoninian coin was estimated to contain less than 2% of its original silver content. It had become a mere metallic shell, a monetary charade. The coins were no longer backed by anything tangible. They were mere illusions of value. This crisis impacted everyone, from the peasant in the Gallic hills to the patricians on the streets of Rome. Merchants, who had previously profited from the steady flow of reliable currency, now demanded payment in gold or tangible goods. Urban laborers, in turn, saw their wages vanish before the month's end. The military, the bedrock of imperial power, bore the brunt of instability. Deprived of reliable stipends, they became volatile and demanding. Consequently, many emperors ascended the throne through military backing, contingent upon promises of remuneration, promises they were often unable to fulfill. This yielded a succession of coups, transient emperors, and incessant civil wars. Monetary devaluation also emptied the state's coffers. Taxes began to be levied in kind or through forced labor, as faith in currency as a means of revenue had dwindled. Provinces, increasingly autonomous, started retaining resources locally, weakening the central authority. Political fragmentation accelerated. Faced with this chaos, some cities began to mint their own currencies or adopt pre-monetary practices, such as payment in salt, grain, or even hides. The decentralization of value was a symptom of a more profound malaise. The empire was unraveling, ceasing to be a cohesive system interwoven by a dependable economic framework. It was against this backdrop that Emperor Diocletian attempted a desperate response. In 301 AD, he issued the infamous Edict of Maximum Prices, attempting to freeze prices and mandate the use of imperial coinage. But reality proved implacable. The populace simply disregarded the edict, and many merchants preferred to abandon commerce altogether rather than operate with devalued currency. The economic repression only served to exacerbate the crisis. Rome was no longer the same. The currency, once a symbol of order, power, and imperial grandeur, had become a mirror reflecting its decline. Money no longer united, it divided. Trust, once shattered, could not be forcibly restored. And in the heart of the empire, in its squares and markets, the populace no longer saw Roman coins as instruments of progress, but as the harbinger of an era's end. The decline of the Roman currency reveals a fundamental truth. Money, in and of itself, holds no inherent power. Its value is not derived from the metal it is forged from, the imprint upon it, or the decree of an emperor. It resides in trust, an intangible pact between the people and the state, between the payer and the recipient, between the believer and the acceptor. When this thread of confidence is severed, the entire economic system, regardless of its apparent strength, begins to crumble. What transpired in the 3rd century was more than just a silver crisis, it was a crisis of credibility. And when credibility erodes, money loses its intrinsic value. In Rome's case, it became copper worthless. disregarded even by the soldiers and spurned in the marketplaces. Attempting to resolve a fiscal crisis through monetary manipulation merely hastened the empire's descent into ruin. Upon examining this narrative, it is impossible not to contemplate the present. How often have we witnessed governments inflating their currencies, devaluing the people's savings, and printing money excessively as if there were no repercussions? Roman history serves as a stark reminder that hasty economic decisions, devoid of a solid foundation and transparency, can incur a substantial price, not merely in monetary terms, but in social and political stability as well. The Roman currency lost its value because the empire severed its connection with the people. Instead of reforming the economy, the state opted to manipulate the symbol, the currency, believing that no one would notice. But the people did notice. And when the currency ceased to represent real value, it ceased to be currency. In the end, Rome tried to regain control through repression, price controls, punishments for merchants, new coinage, new names. But no decree can restore faith. Trust is earned, not imposed. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of this entire story. Today, we inhabit an era marked by digital currencies, global inflation, and a burgeoning distrust in institutions. The history of Rome's monetary collapse resonates as a stark warning. Without transparency, fiscal responsibility, and a steadfast commitment to public trust, any system, no matter how sophisticated, is susceptible to ruin. If this tale has prompted your contemplation, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you witnessed similar phenomena transpire in the modern world? Have you ever felt the disconcerting erosion of your wealth's purchasing power? And how do we safeguard trust amidst such tempestuous times? Don't forget to subscribe to the Enriching World channel, like the video, and activate the bell notification. Here, each video is a journey through the history of money, power, and the decisions that have shaped and continue to shape our world. Watch the upcoming episodes and discover how the past continues to speak to us, coin by coin.